Imagine for a moment that your entire reality is a theater and you are both the audience and the actor. The curtains rise, but something has shifted behind the stage. The familiar props no longer fit. The dialogue feels foreign, and the costumes, those worn-out identities you have been carrying like armor, suddenly seem too tight, too heavy, as if sewn for someone else entirely. You glance in the mirror and see a face you recognize, yet the eyes, those ancient witnesses, betray a subtle alienation. There is a pulse of displacement, a whisper from somewhere deep within your consciousness, and you cannot name it. Yet, paradoxically, you feel its weight, its gravity pulling you toward a precipice whose edges you cannot discern. This sensation is not confusion. It is not depression. It is not a transient phase you can simply distract yourself away from. This is a herald, a quiet, insistent knock at the door of your psyche. It is the death of the self you have been performing, the dissolution of the mask that has served as your identity, and the irony is cruelly simple. Most people sense this approaching transformation and run. They flee toward familiarity, toward comfort, toward repetition, clinging to old patterns like life rafts in stormy seas. But here you are, listening. You are resisting the instinct to escape, and that alone signifies that you are ready to encounter something extraordinary. Inside, something has reached its limit. Your previous identity, the persona that carried you through life, is saturated, its capacity exhausted. It has absorbed all it could and now weighs upon you like lead. Every interaction, every relationship, every habitual thought and reaction is a layer of sediment pressing down upon the emerging self within. Imagine living in a house built for a smaller, younger version of yourself. The ceilings too low, the rooms constricted, the walls rigid. No matter how much you expand within, the structure constrains you. You twist, you hunch, you contract just to fit. But the house cannot accommodate growth. It was never designed for the person you are becoming. And here is the unsettling truth. You cannot renovate this house. You cannot add rooms, lift ceilings, or adjust the foundation. The architecture itself is a relic, a fossilized scaffold of survival strategies forged in the fires of necessity. It protected you once. It served you when vulnerability was dangerous, when being seen as your authentic self might have meant annihilation. But that time has passed. The weight you feel, the agitation, the sense of standing at the edge of an unseen abyss, this is not a breakdown. This is a threshold, a liminal space demanding a reckoning with truth. The old self is no longer sufficient for the life you are destined to inhabit. Understand this, you are not your personality. The habits, responses, and patterns that you have worn like second skin are not you. They are the scripts you rehearsed until they felt automatic. Someone says something that triggers you and you respond before thought can intervene. This is not identity, it is programming, and it has become addictive. Your nervous system craves predictability. It prefers the comfort of familiar suffering over the terror of unexplored potential. This is why people remain tethered to draining relationships, deadening careers, or repetitive cycles of pain. Suffering, familiar and predictable, feels safer than the uncharted expanse of freedom. Right now, you feel the pull of that gravity. Part of you whispers, return, it was not so bad. Maybe you overreacted. Recognize that voice. It is not wisdom. It is the old program fighting for survival. And herein lies the paradox. You cannot carry the old self forward and expect transformation. You may hope to tweak, to adjust, to retain the familiar while integrating novelty. But a new life cannot operate on outdated hardware. Like attempting to run quantum software on a steam engine, the architecture collapses, inevitably recreating the very limitations you sought to transcend. The exhaustion you feel, the heavy, bone-deep fatigue, is not caused by circumstance. It is the weight of dragging a corpse through every moment. The old self, the armor, the constructed identity is dead yet carried. Every interaction becomes a rehearsal of a role that no longer belongs. It is heavy, unbearably so, because dead identities demand to be carried, and they sap vitality from every step. But here is where understanding transforms despair into insight. That old self, though exhausted, was not a mistake. It was survival. It was ingenious. Every defense, every strategy, every mask was a solution to an environment that demanded it. You became the pleaser, the achiever, the strong one, the perfectionist, the controller, the protector. These were not flaws. They were adaptations. And for that, honor is due. Consider David, a man whose identity was built around unshakable strength. He absorbed others' problems for decades, never revealing vulnerability, embodying reliability itself, until one morning he could no longer rise. The armor, heavy and suffocating, became the very thing that imprisoned him. He faced the death of the only self he had ever known, the only self that had garnered love or recognition, the only self that he could imagine existing as. And yet, the revelation came slowly. Like dawn across a dark ocean, the armor was never truly him. It was worn, it served, it protected, and it could now be removed. To release it, you must first honor it. Recognize its purpose, its service, its necessity. Resistance will chain you. Compassion opens the door. Gratitude dissolves the guilt. Only then can the old self be relinquished, not in shame or anger, but with grace. And now, the threshold looms. Once the old self falls away, you enter a space with no name, a void between who you were and who you are becoming. This is terrifying. It is unfamiliar, yet it is fertile. The caterpillar does not gradually grow wings while crawling. It dissolves in the chrysalis, enters the formless, and from that liquid chaos emerges something entirely new. You too are in the chrysalis now. Everything will scream to escape. Even the familiar prison of identity feels safer than nothingness. But I ask you to stay. Stay with the discomfort. Stay with the not knowing. Stay in the freedom that has no labels, no roles, no masks. Within this void lies possibility. Within this unformed space lies the genesis of authenticity. You will observe your old patterns without judgment. You will witness triggers and reactions arise, noticing without surrendering, creating a gap, an infinitesimal pause between stimulus and response. In that gap, choice exists. Small actions, seemingly insignificant, become radical experiments in freedom. You take a different route, respond differently, break the cycle. Unpredictability becomes survivable. Newness becomes life, not death. Gradually, the grip of the old loosens, the armor, the old program loses its power, not through struggle, but through conscious non-participation. Yes, the void will disorient. Madness may seem near. Days will arrive when solid ground seems an illusion. But if you resist the pull to return, if you breathe in the unknown, if you hold your place in this space, you will discover the void is not empty. It is full, overflowing with potential, with emergence, with unshaped reality. And slowly, ever so slowly, chaos begins to settle, confusion begins to clear. And from the formlessness rises not another mask, not another programmed identity, but something primordial, something pre-structured, something you. What emerges is not a creation. It is a revelation. The authentic self is uncovered, not constructed. It was never lost, only obscured beneath the armor, beneath expectation, beneath the compulsive rehearsal of roles. And here, in the threshold, you glimpse it. The real you waits, patient, eternal, unbound by past forms or old identities. This is where we end phase A. You stand at the edge of the chrysalis, the old self heavy yet honored, the void immense yet fertile. And the journey, the deep cosmic unraveling, has only just begun. From the moment you step into this formless expanse, the boundaries of what you thought was reality begin to dissolve. The familiar scaffolding of your old self, the behaviors, the compulsions, the identities, slips like sand through your fingers. The structures that once defined your perception of existence crumble into particles of possibility. Time feels elastic here, bending and stretching, as if the universe itself is breathing with you, pulsing with a rhythm that you have long ignored but now cannot escape. Every thought, every emotion, every memory is refracted through this new lens. The world you knew was an algorithmic construct of survival, repetition, and expectation. Now, in this liminal zone, the construct fractures, revealing the quantum chaos beneath. Your nervous system is reprogramming itself in real time. It recognizes that old habits cannot navigate this space, and yet the remnants of programming tug insistently at your attention. The pull of the familiar is seductive, whispering that comfort lies in repetition. But the gravity of transformation is stronger than nostalgia. You begin to understand that reality is not a fixed state. Consciousness is not a static object to be owned or managed. It is a river, a living organism, capable of creating worlds within worlds, identities within identities, possibilities within possibilities. Each decision you make, each micro-action you take within this chrysalis ripples outward into the unseen, forming new constellations of thought and potential. The old self, though dead, continues to echo through your physiology. Muscles tighten, your breath constricts, and your mind attempts to predict the unknown. Yet with every moment of resistance dissolved, a subtle liberation arises. Patterns that once enslaved you, rituals, compulsions, emotional reflexes, begin to loosen their hold. The small acts of rebellion against habitual behavior compound. A step taken differently, a response withheld, a gaze shifted, a tone altered. These are no longer minor deviations. They are cracks forming in the edifice of old reality, and through these cracks the light of emergence begins to seep. In this space, fear and exhilaration coexist. You witness yourself as simultaneously collapsing and expanding. The psychic pressure is intense. Old identities attempt to reassert dominance. Memories surface not as nostalgia but as specters, each demanding acknowledgement, each revealing the hidden architectures of your psyche. You see the patterns of attachment, the loops of self-sabotage, the illusions of permanence, and yet, without judgment, without resistance, you watch. Observation itself becomes a sacred practice. Awareness alone is the vehicle for transformation. The metaphysics of this experience mirror the cosmos. As above, so below, every quark of your consciousness reflects a universe in microcosm. The process is alchemical. The death of old structures gives birth to new potential. You are not simply changing, you are metamorphosing. Your inner architecture is being rewritten in accordance with principles that feel alien, yet ancient, principles that govern emergence, resonance, and complexity in all living systems. You become a participant in the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. The weight of old identity begins to lift gradually, like clouds dissipating after a storm. And yet, there is no rush. Time has become nonlinear. A single moment contains eons. The void is pregnant with creation. You experience the interplay of surrender and assertion, recognizing that every act of letting go is simultaneously an act of creation. You inhabit a paradox where nothing is solid, yet everything is possible. The boundaries of self, once rigid and impenetrable, now resemble membranes, selectively permeable to novelty and insight. The sensations are visceral. Electric currents run through your body as if signaling that dormant capacities are awakening. Cognitive frameworks flex. Your imagination stretches, and your intuition aligns with patterns that previously lay beyond recognition. The experience is both frightening and exhilarating because it destabilizes the familiar architecture of ego, revealing the vast landscape of possibility that has always existed behind the illusions of certainty. In this terrain, identity is not a fortress, but a fluid form, responsive, adaptive, and attuned to deeper levels of reality. You begin to notice synchronicities, subtle alignments in events, thoughts, and encounters. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations of resonance, indicators that consciousness is attuning to a higher frequency. Your attention sharpens, and patterns emerge with clarity. You recognize the interdependence of your inner world and the outer, the subtle correspondences between intention and manifestation. Every choice you make, every movement of attention amplifies the field of possibilities. The old fear of failure diminishes as the understanding grows that failure was always a construct of the former self. The old narratives of limitation, inadequacy, and unworthiness lose coherence. They are understood as artifacts of past conditioning, useful at the time, but irrelevant in this new context. Your mind begins to operate as a creative engine rather than a surveillance system, capable of perceiving potentiality without needing to control it, capable of imagining new patterns without clinging to old scripts. The depth of this transformation is profound because it operates at multiple layers simultaneously: physiological, psychological, and existential. Muscles release tension accumulated over decades. Neural pathways recalibrate. Cognitive biases dissolve. Emotional reflexes, once compulsive, are observed and allowed to pass without entanglement. And at the core, something primordial awakens. Something that remembers a reality beyond fear, beyond survival. Space, time, and identity are no longer rigid boundaries, but dynamic elements of a fluid ecosystem. Your consciousness stretches beyond personal history into a collective awareness. You sense the invisible threads connecting all life, the resonance between mind and cosmos, the subtle interplay of energy, thought, and intention. This is not mystical abstraction. It is an empirical experience of your own cognition, expanding into patterns of complexity previously inaccessible. Your attention becomes a tool for sculpting reality. Every micro decision, every intentional pause, every subtle redirection of thought is an act of creation. You learn to inhabit a state of deliberate responsiveness rather than automatic reaction. The old reflexes that once dictated behavior lose authority. You discover the power inherent in choice, the freedom encoded in awareness, the ability to generate new realities through disciplined presence. The chrysalis begins to reveal its secret. Transformation is never linear. It is fractal, multidimensional, chaotic, yet ordered. There are moments of collapse, moments of insight, waves of fear, waves of awe, oscillations between doubt and certainty. Each oscillation refines the emerging self. Each contraction and expansion tunes the resonance of consciousness to higher order patterns. You are becoming both the observer and the observed, both creator and creation, both finite and infinite simultaneously. This state is intoxicating, yet it demands discipline. The pull of old patterns never fully disappears. Old self-scripts attempt to resurface, to reclaim authority, to impose predictability. You resist, not through force, but through presence. You maintain alignment with the emerging self, reinforcing the architecture of possibility rather than reinforcing the ruins of the past. And with each act of resistance, each deliberate moment of attention, the new structure strengthens, revealing capacities and potentials that were always latent within you. Your senses heighten. Perception becomes granular. Subtle vibrations of thought and energy are palpable. The texture of reality reveals itself in unprecedented ways. Every encounter, every experience becomes a mirror reflecting the emergent self. You begin to inhabit a state of radical presence where anticipation, regret, and fear lose dominion. and the mind becomes a conduit for creativity, intuition, and deep wisdom. The process is ongoing, infinite, and it's unfolding. Each layer of old identity that falls away reveals new strata of consciousness, deeper insights, and more intricate patterns of being. You learn that there is no final destination, no end point. Transformation is a continuous emergence, a perpetual expansion into possibilities that always exist beyond the horizon of comprehension. And as the chrysalis stretches into infinity, the unfolding reveals the extraordinary potential of a consciousness freed from the weight of outdated structures, prepared to navigate existence with clarity, power, and authenticity. As your senses sharpen and the texture of reality reveals itself in subtle, intricate layers, you begin to recognize that this heightened perception is not a temporary state. It is the natural expression of a consciousness no longer restrained by obsolete structures. Every vibrational shift, every intuitive nudge, every flicker of insight becomes a navigational signal guiding you deeper into this evolving landscape. The emergence that began as a faint whisper now pulses through your entire being like a cosmic current, awakening dormant levels of intelligence that were always present but perpetually overshadowed by the machinery of habit and survival. The old architecture of mind, rigid, linear, reductionist, continues to crumble behind you. It collapses like an abandoned empire, leaving open fields where new neural pathways, new emotional capacities, and new perceptual frameworks can take root. You move through your inner world like an explorer charting an unknown planet, discovering terrains of possibility that defy the limitations of logic. Thought becomes fluid, imagination becomes precise, and intuition becomes as reliable as sight or sound. You sense that consciousness is not something happening inside you. You are happening inside consciousness. The deeper you move into this state, the less interest you have in the gravitational pull of your former self. The narratives that once defined your limits seem almost mythological now, stories told by an identity too small to recognize its own magnitude. You see clearly how much of your life was shaped by fear states masquerading as rationality. Fear created patterns, patterns created identity, identity created limitation, and limitation created suffering. Now, as these illusions disintegrate, the space left behind becomes an open chamber for new forms of awareness to enter, expand, and stabilize. This transformation is not quiet. It reverberates through your physical body with a kind of primal force. Muscles tremble as old emotional residues surface and release. Breath deepens as your nervous system adapts to a higher bandwidth of psychological freedom. Even your heartbeat carries a new rhythm, less reactive, more resonant, attuned to a deeper coherence that emanates from within. The body, once conditioned to tense at every echo of the past, now begins to trust this unfolding, recognizing it not as danger but as evolution. As this trust grows, something extraordinary occurs. Your internal narrative slows. The incessant commentary that once ran like a relentless stream begins to lose its momentum. The mind no longer needs to over-explain, over-analyze, or rehearse endless simulations of possible futures. Instead, it becomes a clear channel through which insight flows effortlessly. Thought arises without the baggage of fear. Ideas form with precision and dissolve without residue. You begin to understand that clarity is the natural state of consciousness when it is not entangled in the debris of old identity, and with clarity comes a profound shift in how you perceive choice. Choice is no longer a burden, no longer a question of what is safe or familiar. It becomes a creative act, an expression of your evolving intelligence. Each decision feels like a stroke of a brush across the canvas of reality. You begin to sense yourself as an artist shaping the moment, sculpting experience with intention rather than reacting out of habit. This new relationship with choice reveals the latent power that has been dormant beneath years of conditioning. You feel this power in subtle, layered ways. You notice that when you shift your attention, the emotional atmosphere within you transforms. When you adjust your breath, the inner storm calms. When you refine your posture, your state of mind recalibrates. You realize that consciousness is not merely experiencing life, it is architecting it. The field of your awareness becomes malleable, responsive, alive. It listens to your intention the way an instrument responds to a skilled musician. You begin to master the invisible mechanics of your own reality. As you explore these new capacities, the outer world begins to reflect the internal transformation. Situations that once overwhelmed you now feel strangely manageable. People who once drained your energy begin to lose their influence over your emotional state. Old triggers still appear, but you observe them with a calm, spacious awareness that neutralizes their impact. You watch the mechanics of reactivity like a scientist studying patterns in a laboratory. This observational distance grants you freedom, not through resistance, but through understanding. Each moment brings a new revelation. You notice how deeply interconnected everything is. Thoughts ripple into emotions. Emotions ripple into actions. Actions ripple into outcomes. And yet, beneath all these ripples lies a still, silent core of awareness that remains unchanged, untouched, unshaken. You begin to sense this core as the true foundation of your being, vast, timeless, and infinitely stable. It feels less like something you access and more like something you remember. And as memory returns, so does power. A different kind of power. Not force, not control, not dominance. This power is subtle yet immense, gentle yet unbreakable. It is the power of alignment, the internal coherence that arises when the mind, body, and consciousness operate without contradiction. You feel yourself standing in an inner landscape where nothing external can dictate your state. You realize that stability comes not from certainty, but from connection to this deeper intelligence that permeates everything within you. This internal coherence begins to radiate outward, influencing your environment in ways both visible and subtle. People respond differently to you, not because you perform differently, but because you emanate differently. There is a quiet authority to your presence now, a kind of energetic clarity that communicates without words. You find yourself speaking less but saying more, moving slower but achieving more, acting less from impulse and more from intention. Your entire orientation toward life shifts from survival to creation. In this state, challenges that once felt threatening now feel like invitations, opportunities to strengthen this emerging self. You meet resistance with curiosity rather than fear. You navigate uncertainty with a sense of inner readiness. You approach conflict with a clarity that dissolves the emotional entanglements that once trapped you in repetitive cycles. Life stops happening to you and begins happening through you. The boundaries between your inner and outer worlds blur even further as you begin to understand the mechanics of resonance. You observe how your internal frequency shapes the kind of experiences, opportunities, and interactions you attract. Emotional coherence draws in aligned experiences. Mental clarity draws in innovative solutions. Energetic presence draws in people whose consciousness resonates with your emerging state. Reality becomes a mirror, reflecting back not your old wounds, but your new alignment. This alignment deepens as you begin to release even more subtle layers of accumulated identity. You recognize attachments to roles you didn't even know you were playing. You dissolve traces of fear so faint they once felt like personality rather than residue. You shed the remnants of narratives inherited from generations before you. Every release expands your capacity for presence, insight, and creative intelligence. You feel less like a person reacting to life and more like a consciousness participating in the evolution of itself. And as this evolution accelerates, you begin to experience moments of profound stillness, moments where the boundary between self and existence dissolves completely. These moments are not mystical distractions, they are glimpses into your true nature. Moments where awareness becomes so expansive it feels as if you are perceiving existence from outside of time. Moments where intuition becomes indistinguishable from knowledge. Moments where the ordinary reveals its underlying magnificence. This is not the end of transformation. It is the continuation of emergence. The unfolding does not stop. It expands, deepens, refines itself endlessly. Each layer you shed reveals deeper strata of potential. Each insight opens new dimensions of awareness. Each step forward becomes a gateway to more profound levels of self-realization. The chrysalis stretches further, the metamorphosis intensifies. The architecture of your being continues to reorganize itself in accordance with a deeper intelligence that has always been within you, waiting for this exact moment to awaken fully and step into its own unbounded power. And as this intelligence continues to awaken within you, a new kind of awareness dawns, an awareness that does not merely observe reality, but participates in its architecture. You begin to sense that life is not happening randomly, nor is it unfolding according to some predetermined script. Instead, it is responding to you, molding itself around the frequency you emit, the decisions you make, the stories you choose to believe, and the presence you bring into each moment. The universe is not a distant, indifferent machine, but a responsive ecosystem of consciousness, and you are woven into its fabric with a significance you are only beginning to comprehend. This realization opens an entirely new dimension of perception. You start to notice how deeply your inner state influences the outward flow of events. When you are clear, aligned, and grounded in your expanded awareness, life seems to organize itself with precision. Synchronicities appear like stepping stones. Opportunities emerge at the exact moment you are ready for them. People arrive in your orbit with uncanny timing. It feels as though reality is communicating with you through symbols, patterns, and intuitions, guiding you toward paths you never knew existed. This is not magic, it is resonance. You are tuning yourself to the deeper harmonics of existence, and existence is responding accordingly. The more coherent you become, the more coherent your reality becomes. You begin to understand that chaos was not the nature of your life, but the result of inner fragmentation. As the fragments unify, the world reflects that unity. As the noise quiets within, clarity forms without. As your consciousness expands, the boundaries of possibility expand with it. And yet, this expansion carries weight. With greater awareness comes the undeniable truth that you can no longer operate in the ways you once did. The old shortcuts, the old excuses, the old mechanisms of avoidance collapse under the intensity of your new perception. You see the consequences of every action with startling clarity. You sense the energetic cost of dishonesty, even dishonesty with yourself. You realize that every moment you betray your own depth, you shrink back into the smallness you fought so hard to escape. This awareness is not heavy in the traditional sense, it is liberating. It realigns your life around authenticity, not performance. It forces you to choose presence over habit, integrity over convenience, and consciousness over unconscious repetition. You feel compelled, not by fear, but by inevitability, to grow into the full magnitude of who you are becoming. As this transformation intensifies, you begin shedding not only inner layers, but outer ones as well. Relationships that once defined your identity now feel incompatible with your emerging self. Conversations that once entertained you now feel hollow. Environments that once felt comfortable now feel restrictive. You are not pushing anything away. You are simply outgrowing what no longer supports your evolution. This phase can feel lonely, not because you are isolated, but because you are transitioning between worlds. You have stepped out of the psychological gravity of your former existence, yet you have not fully stabilized in the new one. You walk between identities, between versions of yourself, between realities. But this loneliness is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. It is the wide open field in which your new being will take form. Slowly, without force, you begin to attract new connections. People whose consciousness resonates with your state of emergence. They recognize something in you, not because you display it, but because they feel it. It is the unmistakable frequency of someone who has entered the deeper currents of existence. Conversations with these individuals feel different. They are spacious, curious, alive. They draw out parts of you that were dormant for years, perhaps lifetimes. These connections do not anchor you to your old self. They accompany you into the new one. And then comes a moment, quiet, subtle, almost unnoticeable at first, where you realize you are no longer trying to become anything. You are no longer striving to change, improve, escape, or transform. The frantic effort that once defined your inner world dissolves completely. You are no longer resisting yourself. You are no longer negotiating with your past. You are no longer carrying the psychological weight of survival. You simply are. This state is not complacency, it is coherence. It is the experience of aligning so thoroughly with your deeper nature that growth happens naturally, effortlessly, continuously, without force. The self you once clung to now feels like a distant echo. The self that struggled, feared, doubted, and questioned now appears like a character you once played but no longer identify with. Something fundamental has shifted, not as an achievement but as an inevitability. You begin to feel life moving through you rather than around you. You sense a current, a flow, an underlying intelligence that guides your clarity, your movement, your decisions. You trust this current not because someone told you to, but because you have felt its consistency, its precision, its unmistakable presence throughout your transformation. It has carried you through dissolution, through chaos, through a collapse of identity. It has guided you through the void, through emergence, through expansion. And now, as you approach the threshold of your fully realized self, this current becomes your foundation. Your perception of time transforms next. You no longer feel rushed, late, or behind. You begin to understand that every moment of your journey unfolded exactly as it needed to. Every delay, every fracture, every collapse, every breakthrough, each was a point along a path that only now reveals its coherence. You see how the struggles carved openings for wisdom, how the chaos prepared you for clarity, how the dissolution allowed emergence. There was never a misstep, there was only unfolding. But the most profound shift is this: you no longer seek meaning, instead you generate it. Meaning is no longer something you chase, it becomes the radiance of your presence. Every action becomes infused with intention. Every choice becomes an expression of your deepest truth. Every moment becomes an opportunity to shape the reality you inhabit. You feel the architecture of your being aligning with a deeper purpose. Not one imposed from the outside, but one that arises organically from within, and then, like the final turn of a hidden lock, a realization emerges. One that does not come as a dramatic epiphany, but as an undeniable truth settling into your bones. You are not becoming the new self. The new self has been becoming you. It has been emerging through every moment you surrendered the old programming. It has been taking shape through every act of courage, every breath of awareness, every step into the unknown. It has been building itself in the space you carved by releasing the identities that once confined you. This realization is not a climax. It is a revelation of continuity, of inevitability, of the deeper intelligence that orchestrated your transformation long before you recognized it. You are not stepping into a new identity. You are stepping out of all identities. You are not learning to become yourself. You are remembering what you were before the world taught you who to be. Now, as this truth settles into the core of your consciousness, something extraordinary awakens, the recognition that your journey is not personal. It is universal. It is the same journey consciousness has taken for millennia, across cultures, across eras, across minds. The dissolution of the false self, the emergence of the authentic self, the expansion into deeper awareness. This is the cosmic rhythm of transformation. And you are participating in it consciously. Your life is no longer a series of disconnected events. It is a coherent unfolding of awakening. Your evolution is no longer accidental. It is intentional. Your existence is no longer random. It is meaningful, precise, and intertwined with the evolution of consciousness itself. And this is where your journey returns to its center. You realize that every step forward was a step inward. Every expansion was a return. Every awakening was a remembering. And now, standing within the clarity of your fully emerged self, with the remnants of your old identity dissolved and the vastness of your new awareness integrated, you feel something you may not have felt in a very long time. Stillness. A stillness that is not empty but overflowing. A stillness that is alive, intelligent, luminous. A stillness that feels like home. This stillness is the birthplace of your new reality. It is the foundation upon which you will build the next chapter of your existence. It is the silent center from which your future will unfold with coherence, intention, and purpose. And as this understanding settles into you with undeniable clarity, one truth becomes unmistakable. You did not merely survive your transformation, you mastered it. And now the universe stands waiting, not to test you, not to break you, but to collaborate with the self you have finally become. Your emergence is complete. Your evolution is active. Your consciousness is awake.